Last Saturday night, Shira and I had a lovely couple over for dinner. And this is a couple that Shira had met the wife a few years ago on the CJP mission to Israel and have stayed very friendly ever since. So they walked through the front door bearing two gifts. One is a lovely, pretty bouquet of flowers. And the second was a gift that I had never before received. I had never seen anyone in a social context give or receive such a gift. The husband walks into our house carrying this, and it is a 5-volume bound, gorgeously bound set. It looks very Jewishy, and it is very Jewishy. It looks super Hebrew and imposing, and it is super Hebrew and imposing. Not only is it Hebrew, it's in Rashi script, and it looks just like very Orthodox, like this is what you would see in an Orthodox yeshiva. And it has titles that you're probably not going to see on the New York Times bestsellers list. Let me share some of these titles with you. They're Nachal Yitzhak, Ein Yitzhak, and She'elot Utshuvot Be'er Yitzhak. And he walks through the door and he says, "Here, they're yours." Now, the Yitzhak in these titles is a great rabbi from Lithuania in the 19th century, and he was the head communal rabbi in Kovno in Lithuania. His name is Yitzhak Elchanan Spector. Yitzhak Elchanan Spector. And he was both a communal rabbi for this town in Lithuania, but he was also the go-to rabbinic authority for any and all questions of Jewish law. And actually, when you read the She'elot Uteshuvot, questions and answers, the She'elot, the questions come from Jews all over the world. And from all over the world, they send their questions to Yitzhak Elchanan Spector for two reasons. Number one, he was undisputedly a master of all the sources. He just knew all Jewish sources cold. But number two was his menschlichkeit. He was very famous for having a lot of compassion and empathy and applying Jewish law in a way that would see and recognize the humanity of the person before him. For example, he had 150 cases of what's called agunot, and in this context, an aguna was a woman who had been married, and her husband was called into service in the Tsar's army, and he didn't come home, and there was no report of death. He was just a soldier missing in action, and years would go by, and then the question was, without definitive news, he's not clearly alive, he's not clearly passed, we have no news, he's just missing for a long time. Can the wife get on with her life and remarry? And Rav Spector was famous for doing whatever he could do to help women who are agunot, that literally means chained or anchored to the mysterious whereabouts of her first husband, to do whatever he could do to help give her a fresh start and rebuild her life. And it was this combination of mastery and menschlichkeit that made no less an institution than Yeshiva University, modern Orthodox great institution in New York. It named its rabbinical school for Rav Yitzhak Elchanan Spector, the author of these 5 volumes. Now, as he hands them to me, I'm thinking two things. I'm thinking, why is this lovely guest, who's a very, very secular Jew, is a member of a Reform synagogue, what is he doing with the collected She'elot Uteshuvot, the legal works of a 19th century Lithuanian posek? And if he has them at all, why is he giving them to me? So, answer to the first question, he whips out this newspaper. which has a picture of Yitzhak Spivak. And he says, this man is my relative. He's my grandmother's great uncle. He's my relative. And the family is just very proud, get a lot of nachas from the fact that Yitzhak Spivak is in a direct family relative. It's my grandmother's great uncle. And then he says, take a look at this face. And then he calls his wife and he says, honey, let me have your cell phone. And his wife gives him his cell phone. And on his wife's cell phone is a picture of his own father. And he says, look at my father's face. And look at this face. It's the same face, but the rabbi has a beard on it. And indeed, it was the same face, save the beard. So this collection of books is a family heirloom. That's the answer to the first question, why he has it. Then I was thinking the second question. So you love this rabbi, you're proud of this rabbi, family heirloom. Why not just give us flowers? Or if you felt like flowers were not enough, you could always do the addition trick of flowers and a bottle of wine. Why flowers and this family heirloom? So I asked him, thank you, but why? And his answer was just so simple. I can't use them. I'm hoping you can and will. I don't read Hebrew, and I don't read Rashi, and I don't connect with 19th century legal Jewish literature, but maybe you can and they'll live with you. Now, the Talmud has this teaching. Gadol ha'me'aseh yoter meha'oseh. The enabler is even greater than the doer. The person who enables good to be done in the world, the person who facilitates good to be done in the world, is at a higher level than the person who actually does the good. In other words, if this lovely gentleman had left these fine volumes in his home in Brookline, Massachusetts, they would have been an art piece on a shelf, unread. By giving them to me, Shira and I are actually going to Israel on Thursday to visit our father. And we're going to take a couple of those volumes. And in the holy city, Jerusalem, my father-in-law and my brother-in-law, Ari, and I are going to actually read these 19th century legal works. The enabler is greater than the doer. Now, this is a truth that all of us here already know this. Because every one of us here can think about a parent or a grandparent or a great-grandparent who didn't come from much, who came from challenged circumstances, who didn't have money, who didn't have resources, who didn't have an education. And they came to these shores, and they worked, and they scrimped, and they saved, and they did all that so that their children and their grandchildren and their great-grandchildren would have the kind of education and future and life that they couldn't have themselves, but they could enable it for others. The enabler is greater than the doer. Gadol ha'ma'aseh yoter meha'oseh. Now, I just want to pause right here, right now, and double-click. Here we are at the intersection of Martin Luther King weekend, with its call to redeem a broken world. And here we are stuck beginning year 3, with all the problems about the world that all of us know only too well. So we're called by MLK weekend, do something, and we feel stuck. We're called, do, and we feel stuck. We got to do, but we can't do. What do you do when you got to do and you can't do, gadol ha'ma'aseh yoter me'ha'oseh. Maybe we are blocked, maybe we can't do, but here's a whole new move. Here's a whole new arrow in our quiver of arrows. What good can we enable other people to do? Maybe it's a good we can't do it now, but maybe we can help somebody else do that good. That's a real question I want to ask you to think about. I want to concretize it with a famous story about Rav Yitzhak Spivak, who didn't only write these learned sage volumes. He's legion for all these stories about him. Here's the story of his last day in life, okay? He's dying and he knows it, and there's just, like, he's so respected. There's just all this energy out there in the world. They want to pay their respects. And a wealthy communal leader comes to see Rav Yitzhak Spivak in his last day. It's a famous story. And Yitzhak Spivak sees him, and he's thinking, even in his last day, about other people. And he knows that this communal leader has a relative whose name is Herschel, who does not have money. But Herschel does have a daughter. And Herschel cannot fund a dowry for his daughter. And in that time, and in that place, and in that context, the father's inability to fund a dowry meant that her marital prospects were impaired. So this communal leader comes to see Rav Yitzhak Spivak to pay his respects. And Rav Spivak says to him, listen, I've got a request I'd like to ask you. Anything, Rabbi, anything. The rabbi says, I know that your relative Herschel has this daughter, and he can't afford a dowry for her, and she cannot find a chassan. My request is, can you fund her dowry? And if you can, I promise you that when I get to the Ribono Shel Olam in heaven, I'm going to be your mamlitz. I'm going to be your advocate. And what could this man do? He says, Rabbi, of course. On his very last day, Rav Spivak does good times 3. He enables this communal leader to do a big mitzvah with his resources. He enables this father who every night is going to sleep worrying about, will my daughter ever be happy? Will she ever find love? To find love. And he enables this daughter to find a partner. Good times 3. The enabler is greater than the doer. Our broken world beckons. What good can you enable other people to do? Shabbat Shalom.